Throughout the 20 years I've been lifting weights, I've made lots of progress. I've built a good deal of muscle and learned a heck of a lot about how to lift weights efficiently. That being so, I wasn't always the most efficient or knowledgeable when it comes to lifting weights, that's for sure. In fact, as a younger lifter, I made some pretty significant workout mistakes that, when I look back in hindsight, can almost certainly be attributed to greatly decreasing my rate of muscle growth progress at the time. I'm admittedly pretty stubborn too, so many of these mistakes took me years to really figure out and correct, leaving me missing out on some serious progress in my earlier years of lifting weights. In this video, while showing you footage from my latest full body gym workout, I'm going to share two of the worst of these mistakes with you in hopes that you can avoid them and instead stay on the path to building as much muscle as possible. Before we get started, if you find this video to be helpful or interesting, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out. Okay, let's dive in. The first mistake I made was revolving my training approach around the concept that in order to build more muscle, I needed to regularly add more and more weekly set volume to my training routine. Looking back, I think this adopted belief came from the fitness influencers and IFBB bodybuilders I was watching on YouTube. Although I'm not consistently keeping up with what the online fitness influencer world is promoting nowadays, I suspect there are many who still preach the same concept. The logic of the approach made sense to me. If you want to build more muscle, then you ought to make your muscles do more work. More set volume equals more work, so more volume equals more muscle growth. There's almost certainly some truth in that. If you consider doing just one working set per week for your quads versus, say, 6 per week, it's almost certain you would build more muscle from doing the 6 sets over just doing 1 set per week. That instance definitely supports the concept that doing more set volume is favorable for building more muscle. Here's the thing though. There's probably a kind of Goldilocks zone for weekly set volume where muscle growth is maximized. And that Goldilocks zone is likely different per each individual and their genetic predispositions, as well as how effectively executed each of those sets are performed and how close they're taken to failure. When you take all of those variables into account, you might be able to find your Goldilocks zone. I really didn't get the whole concept though. I didn't pay much mind to the prospect that there is a zone or a range of optimal weekly set volume. And I ignored the prospect that exceeding any potential set range or zone might lead to suboptimal growth. For years, I trained with the intention of adding more and more set volume, essentially whenever I could. It was normal for me to do a single body part workout like chest day, doing something like 30 to 40 sets in a single session of combined working sets, drop sets, and myo rep sets, all taken to what I perceived as being to failure or at least very close to it. Did I build muscle with that approach? Well, yes, but I was facing a problem nonetheless. I was running into nagging pains and injuries very frequently. Plus, with such high set volumes, my rate of strength and performance improvements was quite slow. So, although I did build muscle with this approach, the frequent injuries and slow strength progress almost certainly meant I was building muscle slower than I otherwise could have been. Since changing my approach to including a weekly set volume that best fits what I now understand is within my own Goldilocks zone, I've been making much more steady muscle growth progress and experiencing injuries far less frequently. It turns out that building muscle maximally isn't quite as simple as making them do more and more work. After exceeding a certain amount of weekly set volume, progress might actually slow down, not speed up or increase. The second mistake I made was revolving my training around the belief that in order to build as much muscle as possible, I needed to always be lifting heavier and heavier. Now, aiming to get stronger by lifting heavier weights is a very effective means of implementing progressive overload to absolutely accomplish significant gains. If you were to take someone who started lifting weights barely able to do a set of 5 reps at 135 pounds doing barbell back squats, you had them train hard for a year to eventually become strong enough to perform a set of barbell back squats for a set of 5 reps at 225 pounds, you can almost certainly bet that their quads and glutes would have grown a significant amount. So when it comes to aiming to lift heavier and heavier to build muscle, it is an effective means of doing so. However, the approach will eventually come with some potential downsides, and it's these downsides that really stunted my progress. Like you might expect, and have probably experienced yourself, progressing in load will eventually lead you to hitting plateaus. Eventually, you won't be able to just continue loading more and more weight onto the bar. If you could, and consistently were to do so, that would mean you have the potential to squat, bench, and deadlift thousands of pounds over the course of a decade of lifting. Shoot, you'd have the potential to lift thousands of pounds doing things like bicep curls. As cool as that would be, we would hit many plateaus before that could ever be the case. Unless you're Goliath, or Godzilla, or some Marvel superhero. My mistake was this. Upon aiming to always lift heavier in my pursuit of building more muscle, I would hit plateaus and aim to break through them through barbaric approaches. And by approaches, I mean one approach really. And that approach was move the weight by whatever means necessary. That often meant sacrificing my exercise technique in favor of lifting said heavier weight. Here's why that was a bad idea. First, by moving with poor technique, I would be at a higher risk of injury. And yes, you can bet that I ran into far more injuries than I should have because of that. And second, despite moving heavier weight, doing so with poor technique, like with a shortened range of motion, uncontrolled tempo, and faltering exercise setup, meant I was actually exposing my muscles to less tension. See, it's tension that stimulates for muscle growth, so less of it means less muscle growth. Yes, that means even though I was lifting heavy weights, I was actually building a lot less muscle than I was hoping for. Many of my early years lifting weights were stubbornly spent lifting in this manner, and as such, I built a lot less muscle than I otherwise could have been building. It wasn't until I made it a rule for myself to aim to progress by, lifting heavier weights, but only when I could keep my exercise technique intact. It wasn't until I started doing that I got significant and predictable muscle growth results. There's a common principle I've learned in regard to discerning both what your weekly set volume should be and how heavy you should lift. And it's largely through understanding and implementing this principle that's led me to fix both of the aforementioned mistakes that I've shared with you. When it comes to maximizing muscle growth, it's much more about how you lift rather than how much you lift. And this is, again, referring to set volume and load. For example, lifting with a lower amount of weekly set volume, but with fantastic exercise technique and taking each set very close to failure, you'll likely build more muscle than doing a very high or excessive number of weekly sets with poor technique and or too far from failure. And when it comes to lifting the heaviest amounts of weight possible, you will likely build significantly more muscle lifting as heavy as you can with great technique and hitting your target muscle or muscles, rather than lifting heavy to the point of needing to sacrifice your technique in favor of just moving the load around. This isn't a complicated principle, but it took me a long time to figure out. Since understanding and implementing it into my own workouts, it's led me to make much more impressive muscle growth progress compared to the time before implementing this concept. And there you have it. Two of the worst mistakes that I made that stunted my muscle growth progress were: one, aiming to progress by introducing excessively high amounts of weekly set volumes per muscle, and two, aiming to progress by lifting loads that were just too heavy for me to move with good technique. The solution to fixing both of those mistakes has been to revolve my training around the concept that when it comes to maximizing muscle growth, it's about how you lift, not how much you lift. And since adopting and putting that concept into practice, I've made tons of predictable and impressive muscle growth progress. And I'm willing to bet that if you adopt and put that concept into practice yourself, you'll see similar such muscle growth results. At this point, I'd love to know your feedback. Let me know your thoughts and insights in the comment section below. Before this video comes to a close, I want to quickly let you know about the work that I do. When I'm not making YouTube videos or Instagram content, I work full-time as an online physique coach, where I help my clients to accomplish their muscle growth and fat loss goals by optimizing their approach to strength training and nutrition, and I coach them through the process. I've been doing this work for over 7 years and love helping my clients to not only transform their bodies, but ultimately their lives. If you've been considering getting some help with accomplishing your own physique goals, feel free to hit the link in the description below, where you can learn a little bit more about the work that I do and how it can help you. You can even use that link to schedule a free video consultation with me. If you have any questions about my coaching or how I can help you, just email me at sam@jadeathletics.ca. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.